I want to welcome everybody here in Gahanna, Northwest Columbus. We love you over at Northwest. Everybody online, so great to see you. Thank you for being here. All right, I'm gonna call my shot. Next weekend is going to be the best weekend so far of 2020. I'm just calling it right now. All right, it's all gonna start Saturday at noon with the Buckeye kickoff. Come on, OH! And Fox Sports was kind enough to make the kickoff a noon kickoff so it didn't cut into one big party. Come on. Wasn't that nice of them? I mean, they knew we were going to be having this party. They didn't want to rain on our parade and put you in a moral and spiritual dilemma, whether you were going to pick between the Buckeyes and God. You don't even have to pick. You can just do it all right? So, and I'm just going to call it noon next week. The Buckeyes are going to beat the brakes off the Cornhuskers from Nebraska. Everybody believe in that with me? All right. A few of you. If I start talking Brown Steelers, it might get nasty in here, so I'll just leave that alone. But after that, we're going to be doing one big party, and we've made it so everybody can participate, no matter whether you can be here in person or not. And so if you are going to be joining us online, it's not just something you're going to watch. You'll actually be able to participate. If you go to one.church/party, we want to send you a party kit. And we have some things we're going to be doing like at the same time, no matter where you're at. So go ahead and do that. And then our in-person experiences, we have 6 different opportunities, 2 at Northwest, 4 in Gahanna. And so the registration is going to go live today. You can go on and register. You can get your friends to come and be a part of it. And just looking forward to this. I think it's just critical right now that as the people of God, we're walking in the Spirit and we are celebrating the good things God's doing, even though from a cultural standpoint, we're in a crazy time. I just don't think we allow the crazy time to cause us to throttle down on celebrating what God is doing, because God's not doing less right now. God is doing more. It may not feel like that in your flesh, but if you can walk in the Spirit, see in the Spirit, there's some things God's doing that you can't see with the naked eye, but is happening, and the church needs to keep playing offense. All right, the next generation is going to look back on what we did with this opportunity. Did we hunker down? Did we shrink back? Or did we continue to walk by faith boldly? All right, we talk about walking by faith and not by sight. It's when I'm not feeling like it, but I'm going to do it anyway. I'm going to walk in belief that faith is the substance of things hoped for, the evidence of things not seen. I can't even see it, but I'm going to walk by faith. And so we're not going to say, we're going to postpone the party until everything simmers down with the election and the COVID and all that stuff. No, we're right in the middle of it. We're going to celebrate what God's doing. So I encourage you to be a part of it and join in next week. All right, I'm going to wrap up this series we're in right now called Become. Starting with this idea, the premise that God cares much more about who you're becoming than just what you're doing. And you're going to have to find a way to keep this in front of yourself, to renew your mind around this concept, because this is not how our world acts. This is not how our world thinks or assesses value. Our world loves to keep score, loves to rank, loves to climb. And there's nothing wrong with winning and climbing and doing good things. The only problem is that you could climb very high, you could attain a lot, and behind the facade of all of that, actually become a smaller and smaller person instead of becoming a bigger and bigger person. God has called you to actually become who He's called you to be. And that's what He cares about, not so much how much you've attained or accumulated. And so we're looking at this, and we're looking into God's word at how do we become the people that God has called us to be. I want to start with something, kind of a piece of my story, the story of my family. Some of you may know this. If you're new today, this will be new information to you. But my family and I, my wife Shayla and I have 3 kids, Ella, Hudson, and Miles. Both of our boys are on the autism spectrum. I've shared this with the church quite often, and God has taken our family on a journey. It's been a character-building journey. It's been a very rich journey that's been difficult many times but along the way, but that's all right. God uses difficulty, and He's used it to shape us into people that, frankly, I don't know if I'd be the same person had we not walked through it, and so I'm thankful for this journey. But my son Hudson, our oldest son, when he started to sort of show signs, he was around that age 3. He wasn't really talking. He wasn't social. He wouldn't look you in the eye. He had some quirks with his personality. We weren't sure, are these just personality quirks? Is he just a little bit reserved in terms of interpersonal, or is there something we need to be concerned about? So we would for example, in the tub, he would line up all of his ducks facing the same direction, color-coded. And we're like, whoa, man, he's really organized. That's great. He's going to have an administrative gift. And then, you would turn his duck and he would lose his mind. And so he'd be really upset and freaking out. So frankly, my wife and I had a little tension around it. I'm like, I think there's something going on here. And my wife's like, I don't know, let's just be patient. And at a certain place, we said, you know what, let's take him in and get him screened. And we did. They came back and they said, sure enough, yes, your son's on the autism spectrum. Well, to be straight up, like I honestly didn't know much at all about autism. I hadn't taken time to study or look into it. I didn't know anybody who had autism when I was growing up. And frankly, my only paradigm for autism was the movie Rain Man. And so I was like, man, is he going to be able to like count toothpicks with one glance? Like, what is his life going to be like? I was genuinely asking questions. Is he going to be able to be a father? Is he going to be able to be a husband? Like, is he going to be able to work a job? Is he going to be able to move out of my house? Because I've been dreaming about empty nest. And so I'm like, is this going to be a thing? Like, what's going to happen? What's the reality for us? And in essence, what they said is, Greg, your son's on a spectrum, which means based on a lot of factors, based on what he does, based on what you do, based on the help you get, decisions that you all make, and how you live and what you do, he can move on the spectrum. He could really adapt and grow. They said like it's like his brain has all the same rooms yours does. They just need some keys to unlock them in different ways. And so based on techniques and what you guys do will determine where he ends up. And he could go backwards or forwards or whatever. And when they explained that to me, I said to my wife sometime later, I said, I'm on a spectrum. It's not just him. I'm on a spectrum. You're on a spectrum. And I may not be on the autism spectrum, but I'm on like the character spectrum. I'm on the honesty spectrum. We like to think black and white, like this so-and-so is just honest. They're really, I don't know, I'm on a spectrum. Sometimes I'm honest, sometimes I, tell a little white lie. Sometimes I kind of fudge the number. Sometimes I tell a half-truth. We think generous or stingy. I don't know, I'm on a spectrum. Sometimes I'm generous, sometimes I'm downright greedy. Okay, it depends on the day you catch me. They're nice or mean. I don't know. I mean, there's some people who could tell you some stories about me that say I'm not very nice. Sometimes I haven't been very nice. I'm on a spectrum. I'm on the husband spectrum. I can become a worse husband or a better husband. I can become a better man, worse. I'm on a character spectrum, and so are you. And it's important that we acknowledge that, because when you acknowledge it, what you do is two things emerge. One, humility. And I don't mean humiliation, I mean humble. Like you become humble and you realize, dude, I've not attained anything. I've not arrived at anything. I am becoming. I'm becoming something. And so there's a humbleness that comes to you that you don't get too cocky and think you stand. The scripture says, if you think you stand, take heed lest you fall and become a worse version of yourself. So we become humble. The second thing is we become hopeful. If you're here today and you say, I don't like where I'm at. I don't like where I'm at in my life. I don't like who I'm becoming. It is within your power to put your foot in the ground and change direction. You're on a spectrum. You're becoming something, and you can become a greater version of who you are. You can still become. You still have breath in your lungs. You still have time left on this earth. You can become who God's called you to be. So let it bring humility and hopefulness from within you. I'm going to give you kind of a little bit of where we've been in this series, looking at, okay, so how do we move on the spectrum? How do we become better? We're looking at 6 words. Started with security and fulfillment. God's created all of us, everyone who I'm talking to right now, all the 7 billion people in the world, and all of our ancestors, all had these 2 needs, security and fulfillment. Why would you get married? Except till death do us part, you're going to be with me. And fulfillment, life is better with you. Why would you buy a car? Airbags, and because I look sweet driving it. Why would you vote for somebody? Because I think they're going to make me or our country safer, and I think that they're going to make things better, and I'm going to be happier and more fulfilled. So what do I want to hear about? I want to hear about the national security. I want to hear about foreign policy. I want to hear about economy. Go right down the line. This is how it works. God made you this way, and God is awesome, and so he didn't make you a certain way and then make no way for you to have this. God made a way for you to have deep levels of security, deeper levels than you've ever experienced of fulfillment, but you have to do it his way. He's not going to do it your way. You want his plan. Don't ask him to bless your plan. Ask him for his plan. It's already blessed. So I'm giving you the blessed plan, okay? Security, fulfillment comes through these 2 things. First of all, the gospel, which is that you are loved unconditionally. You are loved not just in your blank state, but in your worst state. God demonstrated his love toward us in that while we were sinners, when we least deserved it, least expected it, he loved us, and no one can take that away. We are anointed by God. We've been given the power of the Holy Spirit, the same Spirit from Genesis 1:2, the same Spirit in the Old Testament that filled prophets, priests, and kings, the same Spirit that raised Jesus from the dead lives in you. What would you have to be intimidated about? This is your spiritual DNA. This is your genetic code. You are love, joy, peace, patience, kindness, goodness, faithfulness, gentleness, and self-control. That's your spiritual eye color, hair color, arm length, tone of voice. All of it is embodied in the Spirit, which is the anointing that you have. So when you look in the mirror, that's what you see now, not bound to my previous human DNA, nature and nurture and all that. I am new in Christ. I'm a new creation. That's where my security comes from. When I find that there, now I can come down and I can find fulfillment in my gifts. Big tragedy in the world is some people have been gifted by God to do certain things well, and they're good at stuff, but the stuff they're good at is the area in life that has the most pressure because they're looking to it for their security, and they can't even enjoy being good at what they're good at because they're insecure about it. Once you come to the fact that your security is not in the quantity of your gift, you can enjoy what God has created you to do for your calling, which is people, we said last week. God wants you to be more fulfilled, not by filling you full of yourself, but making you free of yourself so you can serve God by serving people. What I want to talk to you today about is, where does your drive come from? Where does your energy come from? If you're going to do the best work you've ever done in your life and you're going to live your best life, how are you going to do it? Like, where is that energy going to come out of? Because what we don't do is go, you know what, I'm loved whether I fail or not. Everybody hands in the middle, underachieve on 3. We're just going to sit on the couch and we're just going to kind of kill time. No, there is a pure source of energy that's going to come out of you to do the best you've ever done, to live in fulfillment like never before. Rivers of living water coming out of you in a new way, but you have to tap into the right energy. So here's what I want to do. I want to do what Jesus did often. He took a physical example and drove home a spiritual principle. So I want to start with the ecosystem, okay? I want you to think about not the way the world is right now when you go out the door and all the things that you see that have been manufactured. I want you to think about the way God created the world as an ecosystem. And within the ecosystem, things have been designed in terms of energy to work in a circular fashion. What we've done over time is we've found ways to get surges of energy, but we've done it our way. And we've done it our way. We have learned how to leverage fossil fuels. So I want to start with the concept of fossil fuels. Let's just start there. Here's the definition of fossil fuel. Buried combustible geological deposits of organic materials formed from decayed plants and animals that have been converted to crude oil, coal, natural gas, heavy oils by exposure to heat and pressure in the earth's crust over many years. That's a fossil fuel. We know about fossil fuels a few things that we can't even argue. It just is what it is. Number one, we know that fossil fuels are not renewable energy. For example, like eventually we're going to run out of fossil fuel. That it doesn't just replenish itself. It's a certain quantity. It's not going to be our generation, but some generation coming down the road, they're going to run out of fossil fuels. It's not renewable. Number two, it pollutes the atmosphere. And so, it goes up into the atmosphere, and we know all about pollution and what that means and how that works. But here's what we do know about fossil fuels is fossil fuels create tremendous energy. You fill your car with gasoline, that thing can go. It can go 0 to 60 pretty quick. And it can get you from point A to point B. And so when you think about this, within what we have done as human beings is we've created this fuel that frankly isn't eco-friendly, right? It doesn't work with the ecosystem as God created it. Well, when you think about that, I want you to go back and for a second forget about science, but I want you to take that principle and I want you to apply it to your life, your world, your ecosystem, the way that God has intended for you to personally have energy, like what's driving you. Something is causing you to get up early and stay up late. Something is causing you to work super hard. Something is causing you to have a drive internally to achieve, to have ambition. Something. You have a real why, not the why that you wrote down at the HR meeting because you told them what they wanted to hear. I'm talking about the real why. Once you go like 7-10 layers deep, that there's a real why. Something's really driving you. And so I want you to look, and I'm going to read again the definition of fossil fuel. and I want you to forget about science, and I want you to think about you and what's driving you, and let these words attach to your story. Okay, fossil fuel is this: buried, combustible geological deposits of organic materials formed from decayed plants and animals that have been converted into crude oil, coal, natural gas, heavy oils by exposure to heat and pressure in the earth's crust over many years. Okay? Our fossil fuel looks like things like anger. Fossil fuel, things like fear. Fossil fuel, things like insecurity. These are massive energy sources. You put that in your car, you can go from 0 to 60 real quick. My insecurity, my anger, my fear. Fear is tremendously motivating. Let me just run a bear in here real quick. Let's get just a grizzly bear come run through. See how fast you can run. How much energy you have, how high you can jump. Why? Well, because the bear has caused you fear. So the answer, how fast can you run? As fast as you can run. That's how fast you'll run, because you're motivated by fear. Well, guess what? Insecurity is the same way. Fear is the same way. If I have a fear of failure, why do I have a fear of failure? It's because I think I have no value if I don't win. I think my sole identity is based on winning and losing, or my place in the world. So we're talking life and death. Every project's life and death. Everything we do, it's just the stakes are so high. And the geological, organic deposits that happen under pressure causes this. And many of us have been living warp speed, 0 to 60 every day. And I'm worn out, and I push myself to burn out and break down. And I just get a little bit more fossil fuel to keep it going. And something inside of us is like, there's some pollution in my atmosphere. Something feels right. This is not a renewable resource. And frankly, that's man-made, that's man-created, figured out how to manufacture and do. What is God's ecosystem? And God has created, just like he's created an ecosystem in our world, he's created an ecosystem in your world for you to have a renewable energy source. The irony is, when Jesus talks about this himself, he uses renewable energy sources to talk about it. He says to the woman at the well, if you drink from the water I give you, you'll never be thirsty again, the circular fashion. He says, hey, the rivers of living water will bubble up out of you. He uses water to talk about this. Something's gonna bubble up within you that will be renewable. What is renewable energy? Well, renewable energy is energy from a source that is not depleted when used, such as wind or solar power. So today what I want to talk to you about is, how do you tap into and live from clean energy? You're going to need to ask yourself this question today and moving forward, is what kind of energy do you want to live off? And what type of energy do you want to give off? Because you are a contributor to the ecosystem. I'm going to show you what this renewable energy ecosystem looks like from Jesus' words. John 13:34 says this. Jesus says, I am now giving you a new commandment. Love each other just as I have loved you. You should love each other. I want you to notice a few things. Number one, Jesus says love each other, circular. He didn't just say love people. He says love people and people love back. Love in a circle. Because if all you do is give love and you never receive love, you're going to run out. That's not renewable. And if all you do is take love and you never give it back, you're messing up the ecosystem. You're a taker. We got to do this in a circle. And so what does he do? What is the order? The order, he says, is he says, love each other as I have loved you. We receive from the river of living water. We receive from the source that is never depleted. God's love, there's no shortage, there's no end. He has an infinite amount of love that he gives to us, but then it enters into the human ecosystem where I give and take and you give and take, and it's circular. And what's crazy is he uses the term command, which sounds weird to say a command with love, like I'm commanding you to love, like I order you to love. Well, why is he saying that? He's saying it because he's saying if you don't do it, you're violating the laws of the ecosystem. If you only take or you only give, you're violating the laws. I command you, he says, to not mess up the love ecosystem. Otherwise, we'll get into dirty energy. And I have created you to live in the energy system that is circular, that you're gaining from God to one another. Give, take, comes back to God. God's the source, but then it happens within people. It's so important to note here in John 13 that Jesus is very clear about saying, there are some things that we get only from God, but there are some things that God expects us to get from each other. Why would Jesus command us to love each other if all we needed was just us and God? God's made the ecosystem for you to need other people to love and to give and receive love. Now, hear me. There are some things you can only get from God himself. That's it. There are things I can't give my wife. She can only get that from God. There are some things Shaylin cannot give me. I need to get it from God. And sometimes it happens in solitude as I'm quiet with the Lord and I'm praying or I'm worshiping or I'm in his word and I get a revelation or a fresh revelation of the gospel and through the Spirit he renews my mind and my identity's been given. Like, there are some things like the gospel, the unconditional love that comes from God. But understand, there's a whole nother level of loving that contributes to our energy source that doesn't just come in solitude with you and God. It's designed to come through human relationships in a circular fashion, give and take. If it wasn't the case, why would Jesus say this clearly in John 13? I'm commanding you to love each other because this is the ecosystem and he doesn't want you to mess it up. In fact, he means it so much, 2 chapters later, he repeats himself verbatim. John 15:12. This is my commandment. Love each other in the same way I have loved you. Jesus doesn't repeat himself unless it's a big deal. So he says, this is how it works. Now, I'm going to tell you, if you don't enter into this ecosystem where God is the source, but then it spills over into our relationships and they give and take, you're going to end up in bad, dirty energy relationships. And this happens all the time. And this is why people come and they lose hope because they show up to a service. They show up to week 5 of the Become series last week, and I'm building all this up, and I'm like, guys, and now we're gonna get to your calling, and your calling is people, and you're never gonna find your full calling until you give of yourself, you give yourself away. Well, if you've been living your whole life in dirty energy, you showed up to that thing like if you're one of these people that your fossil fuels is that you grew up in an environment where you had very low self-image, you had a very low self-esteem, you don't think you have any value. And so what your life has been, those are your fossils. And the way you dealt with those fossils is you tried to find value. And what made sense to you was to find anything you had of value and just give it away. And so you gave away your body, and you gave away your energy, and you gave away your time, and you gave away your focus, and you made it about everybody else. And if your fossil fuels were hot and combustible enough, you actually weren't able to receive love. So even when people tried to give you unconditional love, you pushed them away. You wouldn't receive it because you felt you didn't deserve it. I don't deserve to be loved. So anytime somebody even tried to love you, you pushed them away, or you said they were insincere, or you couldn't handle it. So then even the sincere people that tried to create an ecosystem with you, you wouldn't allow them to. But then you attached yourself to somebody who also had dirty energy, except they had a different kind of dirty energy. They didn't think that they didn't deserve anything. They thought they deserved everything. They were like a narcissist. They were born and their parents had a line of people ready to powder their hiney as soon as they came out, and the whole world revolved around them. So they're a taker, and then they found you because you're a giver, and they start taking, and then you're just totally depleted. So then you roll into one church in week 5 of the Become series, and you are completely on E because you've been running on fossil fuels and you got nothing left. And then the preacher gets up like, I got really good news today, guys. I'm going to tell you about your calling, and your calling is to give yourself away. Yep, just give it away. And you're going, dude, no, like I've got nothing left. I'm totally, completely shot and exhausted. And the narcissist is over there going, yeah, give yourself away to me. And it's just a mess, right? And this is where we end up hopeless, and we think we can't even walk in the fulfillment of our calling because we've never tasted clean energy. It's always been dirty. Well, this is what it looks like, is that you have to come to the place where you realize that giving of yourself in the right ecosystem is not a depletion. It's that I'm consistently connected to the vine. He's the vine, I'm the branches. Remain in me, you'll bear much fruit. Apart from me, you can do nothing. So God continues to pour into us, and then we evaluate our environment to go, am I in a relationship where things are coming circular, where I'm giving and receiving? So I don't get in a marriage unless the person's already proven that they can receive and give and do both. I don't enter into a serious covenant of a business relationship unless we understand this ecosystem, because the environment that I'm in is going to affect my spectrum. It's going to affect whether I go this way or that way. And God has designed this where we give it and it comes back, and we give it and it comes back, and we go to him and it comes back. You see how this works? A renewable energy source. That's why Paul says, when he's trying to help us get this even more, Paul says in Romans 13:8, owe nothing to anyone except for your obligation to love one another. What a weird word. Why would you say obligation to love one another? Well, the obligation is not like, oh, I feel obligated to love you. It's I have a responsibility to love you because I understand the ecosystem. And that responsibility takes me into the clean energy where I say, you know what, I have a responsibility to do this whether I feel like it or not. Whether I feel like it or not. You see, we confuse love, which is renewable energy, with romance, which is not renewable energy. That's just another fossil fuel where you crave romance. Romance is not sustainable. Romance is a fossil fuel and it'll burn out, and it's great, but it's just not going to be there forever. You know, like we apply the romance mentality, we replace love with romance, and we bring that to the relationship with God and each other. We think we're going to be able to live in this bliss zone where I feel like loving you all the time. It doesn't work like that. So like, you know, this where, you know, people's expectations aren't met in relationships. Like, you know, when Shaylin and I met, it was major romance. I was just like, wow. I mean, just blown away. She was amazing. Like, wanted to know everything about her, you know, and that's how it is. You romance. You are so intoxicated by this person, your IQ goes down several points. You know, we got these phones, like, you know, this is in the early 2000s. There was no texting, there was no social media. So I bought T-Mobile phones, and it was I don't know if you remember those, but I mailed it to her, and we'd be on the phone, and we would be on the phone listening to one another breathe, you know, just dumb stuff. Our conversations, where it was like, what are you doing? Nothing. Yeah, what are you doing? Nothing. Come on, don't act like you haven't been there. It's like, then it got dumber, you know, it's like, what are you thinking about? Nothing. I'm thinking about you. Oh my God, you're so sweet. I mean, dumb. Romance, and you had those feelings, and is intoxicating, and that's romance. That has a season. It's going to burn into the air. You're not going to have that forever. And people are the same thing with God. They come to a relationship with God and they understand how they're loved and that it's unconditional and that it's amazing. And then they have these expectations of God, that it's always going to feel like the worship set. It's always going to feel like the weekend service. And it's always going to feel like I'm always going to be floating on clouds. And then what happens when God doesn't meet your expectation because for one reason or another you were miscommunicating, and then you're going to run for the hills. And then we do this in relationships when somebody doesn't measure up. And so we end up with these very shallow relationships based on fossil fuels. No wonder we're alone. Designed to be in an ecosystem where I give and take, and I understand that love, in a certain sense, is a responsibility and obligation, because I'm not going to rob the ecosystem. I understand if I take and don't give, or I give and don't take, or I don't go to the ultimate source and find my fuel there to be able to give out, to have a circular community of love, then the ecosystem is going to get messed up, and I'm relegated to fossil fuels. You're not meant to live that way. We got to understand it. We have to apply it and live in that way. Some things only come from God, but some things God has designed to come from him through someone else. A few years ago, I was going through a hard time emotionally, spiritually, and kind of the way I'm wired as a person, even in my relationship with God. I'm not saying that what I'm about to tell you is the way to do it. I'm just telling you some of my flaws and tendencies and things I sometimes can do, but I tend to sometimes view myself with God like I'm a soldier in his army, and God, just give me my marching orders and I'll go. I don't tend to feel like I need big snuggles from heaven or, you know, words, you know, big hugs and whatever. I just need, like, God, you tell me what you want me to do. And then there's even a part of my personality that's like, I tell you what, God, you have bigger things to worry about. You go take care of the other country. You go help those other families. I got this. I won't even bother you with it. And I'll go do, you know, which is immature thinking, because God is omnipresent. He's omniscient. It's not like people who have limited time. He's in. So it's God wants to do things wants you to do things with him, not just for him, right? But anyway, that's where I tend to go. And there was a season where I was really hurting, and frankly, it was around the deal with my sons, and I was just feeling weak, and I was feeling like I'm out here trying to do the mission of God, and yet I'm depleted emotionally. And so I just kind of prayed this prayer. It was a fairly abstract prayer, but I was basically like, God, I need a connection to you. I wish I could look in your eyes. I wish I could feel your arm around me. I wish, you would just do something. And I was praying in solitude, but I just didn't have what I needed. There was more there. I had kind of a wound I was working through. Well, a couple weeks later, I'm at this event with an organization I'm a part of that helps plant churches and stuff. And there's a guy there who's become like a mentor in my life. He's given me a lot of great advice. He's been an encouragement. He's one of these guys, he's like super like outwardly affectionate, and it's not creepy, but it's like it pushes your boundary of like, dude, like he'll walk up and like start rubbing my arm. He's like, dude, have you been working out? Like, dude, you're looking real. I'm like, okay, let's just be friends. But it's like, he's really genuine guy, and he just loves people and has so much of the character of God inside of him. And so I'm at this event, and I'm talking to somebody, and it was a fairly formal event. There were like hors d'oeuvres and stuff, we're standing there, and all of a sudden I'm standing there, and I feel these arms come around me like this, bear hug me and pick me up, so my feet are like off the ground. I'm like, dude, I've got hors d'oeuvres in my hand, you can't pick me. And so I come around, I turn around, and it's him, and he puts both hands on my shoulders, and he looks me just dead in my eye, and he's like, it is so good to see you. And it was just like he meant it. And I don't even remember what else he said. I just remember how he said it. And then as he's sitting there talking, his voice went silent, and the voice of God said, there's some things you get right from me, but there's some things that come through other people, and I'm answering your prayer. And I got to tell you, I didn't need one more quiet time with God in that moment. I needed God to use a brother in Christ, a spiritual father, so to speak, to come along and I needed to feel somebody's arms. I needed to look into an actual eye. I needed to feel that touch. I needed that. And this is the ecosystem that we're meant to live in. You want to run off clean energy? It's not going to be you manipulating people with your emotions. It's not going to come through. Your cleanest energy is not going to come from fear of failure or insecurity. It's going to come from a love that starts with the Father and spills over into your other relationships. In 1 John 3:16, says this, we know what real love is because Jesus gave up his life for us, so we ought to give up our lives for our brothers and sisters. It must spill over into our human relationships, into the ecosystem, the renewable energy that God has created and called us to live in. Anywhere there's real love and a powerful mission, you have clean energy. All right, so here's how I want us to end it. I want you to ask yourself these two questions. What type of energy are you living off, and what kind of energy are you giving off? And I want you to be honest about the first. What are you living off? What is driving you? Why are you pushing so hard? Why are you going for this? Why are the stakes so high? What is it? Keep peeling layers deep. Get deeper and deeper and deeper. And find out, are you living off dirty energy or clean energy? And then the second is, what energy are you giving off? And I want you to be honest about that. Are you if you're married, starting your relationship, in your marriage, are you in that relationship giving off, because you're a contributor to the ecosystem, are you giving off energy that is unconditional love, or are you trying to get that person to act according to the way you want them to, based on your mood, or based on what you withhold, or based on how you talk? Are you talking down to one another to try to get them, in essence, to act the way you want them to, or to do what you want them to do? Are you in a relationship where somebody's doing that to you? If that's the case, if you look, do we have a polluted atmosphere in our marriage? Is this a depleting resource? If that's the case, hey, it's not too late. You're on a spectrum. Stop where you're at. Get together. Talk about it. What do we need to do? How do we give unconditional love? How do we cause the source to fill us so that we can pour into each other? What are you living off, and what are you giving off? And walk it out in the way God has intended. Make the decisions. What needs to change in your atmosphere? Have the courage to face up. Be honest and walk in it, and begin to practice this and begin to walk in this security. And when your feelings get off, come back to your foundation. I end with this. and where I started, talking about my boys and the spectrum and all this. When we found out both of them were autistic, I called a friend of mine who actually goes to our Northwest campus, and he works in the school system. And I just called for some advice. I said, look, I'm these boys' dad. I want to do my best to do what I can do to try to help them get the help they need. What school should we put them in? Do you have any recommendations on who has a great program? And so he gave me some endorsements. Man, this place is great, that place is great. Kind of gave me some of his inside information, called a few friends, kind of got some things to help guide us. And then he said something after he gave me all that information. He said, Greg, here's what I want you to think about. He goes, think about this. It's not really just the school that's going to make this difference here. He said, it really starts at home, He said, your family, the school's going to help, but what you and Shaylin do and what your daughter does and the way you guys, the environment you create in your home is going to be critical, maybe bigger than whatever the school does. It's going to be huge. And he said, and then you've got the school. He's like, and then you have the church, and it's a community as a whole. It's not like the school is like the silver bullet. This is something you do, but you got to understand this is a big part of it. As I thought about it, I was like, man, that's it. We're on a spectrum too. And part of my spectrum and my character and my honesty and who I'm becoming and all of that has a lot to do. Some of it comes straight from the Father. Some of it comes from brothers and sisters. Some of it comes from our community as a whole, that we work together. But the environment, the ecosystem you choose to live on, and the energy source you live off and give off is going to drastically affect where you end up on the spectrum. So let's make a wise decision today. Let's allow God to speak to us and decide, what do I need to change so that I can walk in clean energy and become who God's called me to be? Why don't you take a moment right now, wherever you're at, just get quiet. Maybe allow God to speak and show you something of how this applies to you and what you need to do.